Hello and welcome to today's episode, which is all about veganising another classic, a Kedgeree, which used to be one of my favourite midweek suppers to make because it's super quick. I filmed the full Kedgeree video a few weeks ago, and then when I transferred all the data onto my laptop, I noticed that the audio hadn't recorded. So I did the instruction cooking part in one video, and then the eating part is in a separate video. I've got the audio for that. But none of the important stuff. Rather than refilming it, I had a cry and then decided, oh, maybe I can try a technique that I saw in someone else use in a video. If I can find the link to that one, I'll stick it in the description for you. But they were making seitan, and I think how they've done it is they've filmed everything in close-up and then they've cut in with a wide angle on the instructions as they were talking through it. So I sat and watched all the footage this morning, made some notes of everything that I need to tell you. Before filming that video, I'd hopped on Wikipedia to find a bit of history about the dish. Dates back to around 1790, and it's a Scottish woman from Dumfriesshire called Stefana Malcolm. Kedgeree is based on a very old Indian dish called khichdi. If I'm not saying that right, please do correct me in the comments. Classically, it's a dish made with beans, rice and onions and some spices. So it's kind of quite a very cheap dish to produce, but really full of flavour, very tasty and quite nutritious as well. British colonialists brought the dish back from India, and the Victorians went absolutely mad for it. So it became kind of a very classic brunch or breakfast dish. Stefana Malcolm then added smoked haddock into it. Yeah, and it just went bonkers. It's very easy to make, so it makes it a perfect dish for midweek or for brunch on a Sunday, that kind of thing. But yeah, it takes maybe half an hour, something like that. And I'm going to give you some tips of how you can make it even quicker than that. The Kedgeree was kind of inspired by doing the scrambled eggs video and the cottage cheese. I noticed when I dry fried the silken tofu, it looked a bit kind of hard-boiled egg-like. The first thing you need to do is heat up a frying pan, ideally non-stick, because then you don't have to put oil or anything in there. You just get it nice and warm, and then dump in a block of silken tofu, which is the stuff that comes in packets on the shelf. It's not the fridge stuff. You probably can do it with that type of tofu as well. It'll just be a little bit harder, a bit firmer. To make it go even faster, if you freeze the block of tofu first and then thaw it out, that splits the curds away from a lot of the liquid, and then you can just drain the liquid off. Once you've got the tofu in the pan, break the block down into sort of big chunks, but don't break it down too much because we do want to keep some bigger kind of nuggets so that it looks like chopped hard-boiled eggs. Obviously, if you're not so bothered about the appearance, feel free to break it down into smaller pieces. For sauteing the onions, I put a little bit of sunflower oil in a saute pan, maybe a teaspoon, and 2 very thin slices of vegan butter. I put the pan on the back burner so that I could pull it forward when I needed it. Unbeknownst to me, the hob turned itself on. I kept hearing like crackling, splattering noises, but assumed it was the tofu spitting into the pan. But then I suddenly looked and thought, that looks much darker than it did a minute ago. Yeah, so I inadvertently made brown butter. Now, brown butter actually tastes incredible. It's got a very nutty, delicious, round, deep flavour. They call it beurre noisette in France. So yeah, if you want to, do that step. If you want to do it safely, without it definitely won't burning, do it on a really low heat. So kind of, mine goes up to 9, I'd do it on 5. If you've got enough to waste and you can afford to waste a bit of butter, do it on a really high heat for about 3 to 5 minutes. Just keep checking it because you'll see the solids inside the melted butter. Just make sure they're not going black. Honestly, the flavour's worth it. It's very, very tasty. I used 3 very small red onions for this one. I might even slot in a picture of me holding up against my face so you can see for scale. All I did was take off the sprouting end, so it leaves you with the root attached, cut it in half, peel off the outer skin, and then did a series of vertical cuts and then across that with horizontal cuts, just for a large dice. If you want to have slices, just cut them in half and then do kind of half moon shapes, or do it on a mandolin, whichever you want. My first time-saving tip is to invest in a bag of dried onion pieces. So that's just onions that's been chopped down and then dehydrated. You can rehydrate that in some plant-based milk or even just plain water, or you can do water with some of the spices that I used and some of the liquid smoke, which I'll explain about later, just to get a bit of extra flavour in there. Just soak it maybe 15 minutes. If you heat it slightly, they soften much faster. And then you can just dump that in with everything else. You won't get the same caramel flavour necessarily, but you can fry it for a couple of minutes. But it just means you don't have to chop anything. So if you come home from work and you're shattered, great time saver. Make sure you keep going back to your tofu that's in the pan because it will start sticking, especially because there's no oil in there. But the benefit of using a non-stick is that it doesn't stick. So anything that does catch on the bottom, it will lift off quite well. Once I had the onion all diced, I then put the fish fingers in the air fryer. I did 8 altogether and I cooked them at 190. Mine's got some presets on there, so I did the kind of shrimp symbol, which is 190 degrees C. I will stick the conversion up there for you. And that was 6 minutes. So then once that had done, I flipped them over and did the same setting again. The fish finger packet said to bake them at 230 degrees. The convention for air fryers is to go 20 degrees lower and 20% shorter, but I know for a fact that if I'd have tried air frying those at 210, apart from the fact it doesn't go up to 210, it goes, 205 is the highest it goes. But if I'd have done it at maximum temperature, the outside would have been black before the inside had cooked. So I went at 190 just because it's much safer. I'd rather put them in longer and have a crispier outside than them being, yeah, burnt and uncooked in the middle, because that's not fun. I got the brown butter up to temperature and popped in fresh bay leaves. That's to give a nice bit of freshness, and it also adds a bit of savoury kind of flavour to them. Traditionally, when you're cooking with smoked haddock, it's nice to poach it in milk that's got bay leaves in it, so I kind of pulled on that. If you can't get fresh, you can use dried, or you can leave it out altogether. Or you can use avocado leaves, that's also quite nice. I then added a teaspoon of garam masala. So this is an Indian spice mix. Coriander, cumin, cinnamon, black pepper, cloves, ginger, cardamom and dill seeds. There's also a bit of turmeric in here, kind of nice deep Indian flavours. I fried off the garam masala for, I don't know, 30 seconds or so. You'll know it's a good time to start adding the onions when you can really smell the spices quite intensely. That's a good time to drop them in. You can easily make up your own spice blends. You can toast them off in a dry pan and then pop them in a coffee grinder or pestle and mortar, and then you've got it all ready to go. Once I'd added the onions to the pan, gave everything a good stir, and then added about a 1/4 teaspoon of salt. And that is for a little bit of flavour, but also it helps pull moisture out of the onions so they fry and caramelise a bit faster. You want your onions on kind of a medium-high heat at this stage, just to get them cooked down nice and quickly. They'll be in the pan probably 10-15 minutes. They'll start going translucent, and that's, you know, they're getting nice and cooked. Once the onions were cooking, I got the rice out of the Instant Pot. The crucial part of cooking rice is to rinse it a few times. So when I use the Instant Pot, I put the quantity of rice in the Instant Pot liner, cover it in water, swill it, and then drain that and repeat a few times. When you first add the water, it'll be really cloudy, and that's all the excess starch coming off the rice. So you want to get rid of that because that's what makes it stick together quite badly. The ratio for cooking white rice, like basmati, that kind of thing, you want to do 1 part rice to 1 part water, and that gives you a perfect light fluffy grain. You can also buy the ready-made pouches, so if you're in a real rush, just bosh one of those in. So just fork through the grains in the liner, and that just fluffs everything back up again. Because if you put a solid big thing of rice that's a big clump like that into the pan, it can get a bit messy as you're trying to break it up. This is the stage where you want to combine it quite well, the rice and the onion spice mix, because once you put the tofu and the fish fingers in, you need to be much more gentle, otherwise everything's just gonna fall apart. I had the tofu in the dry pan for 25-30 minutes, and by the time it was ready to come off the heat, it was kind of golden brown in places. If you want it to be pure white, keep it at a much lower heat. And I'd also recommend doing the freezer trick, just so then it doesn't need to be in the pan for that long. Because the pieces were quite big, some of the chunks, to get those to dry out, obviously needs to be in the pan longer. Once it got to the texture where I wanted it, so it was slightly bouncy, a little bit firm, I added in a sort of pinch of black salt. Now, black salt is typically from India, and it's got a very high sulfur content, which makes it taste very eggy. So it's a great one for injecting some egg flavours into things. So I turned the heat off and then sprinkled the black salt on, folded it, and then just left it on the stove until I was just about ready to mix everything together at the final stage. If you don't want the egg flavour, the tofu has got a kind of mild flavour. If you think about eggs as you're eating it, it's like, oh yeah, that tastes... In fact, it tastes a bit like when you fry an egg and you get the kind of crispy bits on the outside. That's what fried tofu tastes like a little bit. It's got that, it's in that neighbourhood anyway, but the black salt just nudges it into the house, I suppose. Because I was using the vegan fish fingers instead of smoked haddock, to get the smoky flavour, I added in some liquid smoke. I believe they put wood chips over heat and then put like a metal lid over the top and then wash the top down afterwards with, I think, a bit of water and maybe some vinegar. And that's how you get liquid smoke. And it's got that kind of hickory, smoky flavour. I've got a smoked rapeseed oil, and that tastes a bit like kippers to me. So you could maybe use something like that. I mean, I've had this bottle since going vegan, and it's still up here, and it's been almost 5 years. So a little goes a long way. But yeah, I think I picked this up off Amazon for maybe £6, something like that. So it's not excessively expensive. I think I probably put a 1/4 teaspoon in altogether, no more than half a teaspoon. It's quite potent, the flavour. You really don't need much at all. I scattered some of the liquid smoke on and then folded it all together, and then, you know, kept checking the flavour. If you want more in, add as much or as little as you want. Once I mixed the onions and rice together, I checked the flavour and decided to add a teaspoon of curry powder. Again, it's quite similar to the garam masala. I had some curry powder in the drawer that I've had for years. So that went in as well, just to boost up that flavour. Or you can just add a bit more garam masala, whichever you're using. I also added a little bit of regular salt and black pepper in with the curry powder, just again to lift the flavour. So I then very gently folded in the fish fingers and the tofu, and as I was folding things, pulling out the bay leaves as they appeared. You can leave them in there and the flavour will develop a bit more. They're not very pleasant to chew. They're very, very fibrous. So it's not really an edible leaf as such. If I'd have remembered to buy some from the shop, I would have put fresh parsley in. So I would have taken, you know, like a 30-gram packet, which chopped up is probably about a cup or so. And I would have done half into the mixture, maybe even 2/3 into the mixture, and then some to put on top, fresh as I serve it. This is a dish that's going to be better eaten fresh. I reheated what I had left over, and because of the coating on the fish fingers, when you microwave it, it goes a little bit stale and chewy. It was still very tasty, but the texture just wasn't as nice as it was when it was fresh. So I'd maybe, you know, just do smaller portions. I mean, you could even cook, you know, get the onions and spices and everything cooked together and then freeze little portions of that, and then just dump everything into a pan and, you know, air fry or grill the fish fingers as and when you need them. As long as my note taking earlier today has been on point, we should now be at the stage where I can hand over to past me and we can do some eating. So that looks pretty wonderful, I have to say. Squeeze some lemon over it, and the lemon kind of gives it a bit of brightness, just lifts it up a touch. And then I chopped up some fresh coriander and chives, just again, little pops of bright, zingy flavour. So yeah, it looks like a fantastic little forkful of food. Lots of really nice textures in there as well. Like the fish finger coating gives it a nice bit of crunch. And the rice is kind of soft, but there's something to bite on. The tofu worked really well. It's like a hard-boiled egg substitute. That touch of liquid smoke, it's really triggering my sense memory of smoked haddock. Big dollop of lime pickle on there would be just a treat. That's nice and tangy and sour. For some extra indulgence, a bit of richness, you can fold through a few tablespoons of coconut cream. Just before you put in the tofu and fish fingers, mix it together so you can fold it in, you know, really well. And it just gives, yeah, just a nice bit of sauce on it. But I prefer a cleaner texture and taste to it. I don't want anything creamy. I want something that just each bit speaks for itself. Hit subscribe and tap the bell icon if you want more plant-based food that's delicious and fast to prepare. In the meantime, have a look at this one.